tetragrammaton.
Unlike a lot of entertainers, my dad encouraged all his kids to go into showbiz. And so when I was about 8 years old, he'd say, hey, come on, you're going to come to work with Dad. You get to get out of school, make some bucks, buy some toys or whatever you want. Come on, I said, oh, okay. And so I looked at it as basically pretend. Remember being a kid and pretending? And so, it's always, nowadays it's like advanced pretend, basically. You get to play with all the cool kids, you get the cool gear. That's basically what it is. And something else that hasn't changed is my anxiety about it all. I'm always quite anxious,
What do you attribute that to?
Just the unknown, you don't know what's going to happen, and
we never know.
You never know, man. And, but we have this imagination that we can jam, man. We can ruminate our asses off, man. And so, and that's what, acting is all about that. A story just popped into my head. We go string of consciousness in this kind
always.
of thing. Yeah. So I'm about 16 years old, and I go with a bunch of my dear friends, and we go to my parents' beach house down here, and now it's time to leave. I'm turning out the lights, right, to leave and lock up. And that little feeling of fear of the dark. Remember that feeling, the fear of the dark? I said, let me see, what happens if I invite that in and let it engulf me? And boom, it drove me to my knees. I went fetal, man. I just was shaking like this.
When was this?
Just like I was 16,
Wow.
So how many years? I don't know, I'm 76 now, so I don't know what year it was. And my friends came in and said, what's wrong, man? What's wrong? You okay? I said, yeah, man, that's something amazing just happened. They said, what? I said, I can be afraid of anything I want to be afraid of.
Yeah.
It was really quite remarkable. And so that you carry that into the acting too. But, remember pretending, when you were a kid, the better you can, the more real you can take the shot, or the more real you can do anything, the better. There's a lot of different approaches to acting, but that's kind of my approach.
Tell me about your dad.
Oh, well, like I said, my dad loved acting, man. His father didn't want him to be in acting at all. Wanted to study law or something like that. But my dad wanted to act. He became the head of the drama department in UCLA. This is, I don't know, in the 20s or early 30s. That's where he met my mom. And he just, loved acting and struggled his ass off, went to New York, Here's an interesting little tidbit. So this is like, I don't know what year, maybe 60. Meredith Willson wanted my dad to be the music man because my dad sings. And one of my earliest memories is Meredith Willson and Renee Wilson, his wife, coming over to our house and playing the whole score, the music. What a score.
Yeah, amazing.
And one of my earliest memories is Meredith Willson coming up to me as a kid and say, you got trouble right here in River City. And, doing that whole song to me as a kid.
Wow, so cool.
And then Teague DaCosta, the director, wanted Robert Preston, who just kicked ass in that role. I mean, he was remarkable. And my dad got Sea Hunt that same year. So it worked out well for him. And then my acting career kind of, took off. I was doing stuff in high school, different things. I had an agent and all of that. But I resisted acting quite a bit.
Really?
Because I had other things I wanted to do. Music, painting, art. I had a bunch of other stuff. And I didn't want to compete with my brother, Bo, who was also an actor, and my dad. And I didn't like that whole, what's the word?
Nepotism.
Nepotism, thanks, man. That whole thing. So I said, Dad, I don't know. He said, Jeff, don't be ridiculous. That's the wonderful thing about acting. Is that you're going to be called upon to do all of these things that you're interested in. Look at Crazy Heart, win that award. That came out of listening to my dad, and the music, came around,
Amazing.
So that gives a hit of my dad. Then when I was doing Sea Hunt, he would teach me all the basics. I remember sitting on his bed and running lines. He says, you got to, learn your lines so you're not thinking about it, thinking about what you got to say, but also listen to what the other guy is saying. You don't just say your line when that guy stops talking. You got to let what he said inform what you're saying. So that kind of basic, he's now go out of the room, come back in, now do it completely different. I don't care how you do it, just do it completely different.
Great advice.
Yeah.
And do it different each time.
Yeah.
Just try new ways.
Yeah, new ways and mess around like that. So he taught me all the basics.
That's
but
amazing, though. As a little kid,
As a little kid.
That's great.
But the main thing, doing Sea Hunt, now I'm about 8 years old. And I remember at the time, this kind of embarrassed me, but looking back, I say, oh, I'm so proud of my dad. That's another thing I love about making movies. It's all kinds of people, different points of view, philosophies, politics, all of that, So you're working with all different kinds of people. And there's some directors, there are many different approaches, and a lot of them work a lot of different ways. One way that my dad did not abide by was cruelty or meanness. And there was some director that was being sharp with a PA and, embarrassing this young woman. And my dad, who was the star of the show in Sea Hunt, he said, excuse me, I'm going to be in my trailer, and after you've apologized to the crew in front of, what you did to this woman, you can come and get me. But until that time, I'm just going to be in my trailer. So let me know. As a kid, I said, oh, but looking back, I said, yeah, that's the kind of guy he was.
That's great.
And then another example of what he was like was probably the most important thing I ever learned from him, although it wasn't in the form of words, it was just his behavior, was the joy in which he approached the work. They call it a play. It's play. It's like, this is cool what we're doing. We're playing, man. And he would come in with this attitude, and that would go through the whole cast and crew, this sense of joy. And of course, when you're joyful, you get relaxed, right? And out of that relaxation comes the good shit, right? Or that's what I find.
No, for sure.
And so then as an adult, I got to work with him twice. First time was in Tucker with Francis Coppola, and talk about pretending, and like he's got a great child quality to him, as well as being an incredible artist on many levels. And one of the things Francis would do is that he storyboarded quite heavily. And then he would shoot with the film camera, his storyboard. And then we had a 2-week rehearsal. The first week was just hanging out, getting to know each other. And the second week, he got the cast and crew together. And he said, all right, guys, now this week, we are going to shoot the entire movie. Vittorio Storaro here, he's going to use this little new fancy digital camera, and that wheelchair, that's going to be his dolly. And you wardrobe people, look at these curtains. These would make good wedding dress. And you actors, get off book if you can, because we're only going to do each scene one time. And we're going to do it in order. It was like Little Rascals, come on, let's make a movie, we're having fun, And he shot the entire thing, filmed it like this. And then what we didn't know was to and fro from work, he sat in the back of his black Citroen and edited this thing. At the end of that week, he gave each of us the movie. He said, look, you just got to polish it up.
Amazing.
And then what he would do, he had that storyboard, as he completed those scenes, he replaced the storyboard with those scenes. And then as we shot the movie, he replaced it. He replaced that. So the movie was always in existence.
That's unbelievable.
Isn't that a wild technique?
I've never heard of anything like that.
No, it's so incredible. And then for an actor, because you shoot out a sequence, to have the whole story there was really...
Yeah, you can understand the emotional arc in a way that you never could.
Yeah, and that brings to mind Sidney Lumet, who my dad worked with in Tragedy in a Temporary Town. I worked with him in a movie called The Morning After with Jane Fonda. And Sidney, who was an actor...
I didn't know he was an actor.
Oh, yeah, yeah. He knew about rehearsing and what that's all about. And so we rehearsed our ass off in that movie. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but we would run the whole movie twice. He taped out a gym, like a play, basically, taped out a gymnasium, all the right size of the sets that had been chosen. And his main direction is, I don't want any indication here when we do this. Every time you do the scene, I want full-blown performance level shit, and get off the book as soon as you can. But it's interesting, all these different approaches. You know, some directors say, no, we don't want to rehearse, you're going to leave it. But acting, you're going to do take after take, and, you know, this thing. I didn't read all the books that my dad read, but so I got a lot of it from just him talking to me and my mom. He said, when you're working on a scene, work on it in 3 different ways. One way is how you would do it if it was happening to you. So really, you know, look into yourself, you know, and use how you would be if you were the character. And then do it from the character's point of view and work on the scene in that way. And in other words, if the guy's got a limp or an accent or, you know, a twitch or whatever, start to work on it that way. And then the third way, and I remember him saying probably the most important way, is architecturally, in a way. Like, think of each scene as a building blocks. You're building a building, you know, this story that you're telling. And each scene has a purpose in this story, you know, and you can do it very many ways. You can hold back. How does that story look, you know? How does that brick in that building look? That's why it was so helpful to bathe in the story that way, you know, get familiar with what are we telling, what are we saying here, you know? That, you know, some of the actors that I admire, I was just watching Philip Seymour Hoffman in a Sidney Lumet movie. Wow, what is it? Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. Have you seen that? Mm-hmm. Oh, God. Do you get the Criterion Channel?
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, it's on that. Ethan Hawke, who's, you know, another,
Great.
What, and those guys cooked, man. Tommy Lee Jones is
Great.
Another guy like it. So there's an opaqueness. He's not showing you.
Yeah.
He's just, it's that sort of thing. It's not indicating.
Yeah. And it also lets you get more involved as a viewer because it's like there's more to discover.
That's right. They're
not telling you what to think.
It's like musically it'd be violins, you know, that like...
It's open to interpretation.
Yes, right.
And all the best stuff is open to interpretation.
Yeah, and think of radio. What radio is like. My dad, I remember he did radio before TV.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh, and I think that might be coming back. T-Bone and I are doing, I guess they're called podcasts now.
Yeah, great.
We're doing something, you know, a movie like that. But
like a recorded story.
Yeah, because then the audience supplies all of the special effects, all of the sets, everything. And there's a technique on how you draw that out, just the right amount, you know. Both my mom and my dad. My mom is probably the best actor of the whole family, and I could tell you stories about her. You know, she would have this thing that she did with all her kids called time. And that was every day, each kid would get an hour with mom, doing whatever that kid wanted to do. Could be, I want to go into your makeup. I want to make you up like a clown, and I want to, you know, make me up like a clown. And, you know, okay, now this is the spaceship. You get under there. You're the astronaut, and I'm going to be a Martian coming after you, like that. the phone would ring. No, I'm having my time with Jeff. I'll call Betty back.
Amazing.
You know, an hour a day. And there was no sense of duty. It was, she was getting off. I mean, she was playing with her kid that she just loved. So now we cut, you know, 30 years later, I'd call her up and say, Mom, I need some time. What are you doing for dinner? You know, I said, oh, it'd be great, you know. Now she's about, you know, 90 years old or something. Do you ever eat at a restaurant called the Palomino in Westwood? It's a, you know, nice restaurant. And we'd finish our dinner, and now we'd be walking back to get our car. The valet would be there, and my mom would say, "Be mean to me."
Be mean to
be mean to me. And I said, oh, and I knew, and I didn't have to ask her, "What are you doing?" I just knew exactly what she was doing. And I say, we get to the car, and I say, "Get in the fucking car." And she goes, she looks at me, she goes, "Why are you so?" I say, "Don't talk back to me, bitch. Get in the car."
Funny.
This is, you know,
so
fourth of ballet,
funny.
man. As they, you know, just, and we never, you know, and we just looked, we like, never broke character, and we just enjoyed the guy's face, you know.
Unbelievable.
And that was her sense of humor, and she would just love to do that kind of thing, you know.
So funny.
Yeah. I just thought of another, you know, something my mother, talk about my mother. And this is such a deep mantra, really, that she gave me. As a young kid, you know, acting, we'd be in, you know, in high school going off to a gig, and my mom could tell me, "Oh, he's anxious," you know. And she would say, Jeff, come here. Remember, have fun, and don't take it too seriously.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Great advice.
And now my wife, you would think you would learn that lesson. No, I never learned it, man. My wife.
How did your mom know it?
Well, she's married to my dad, man. I mean, the actor, and she, you know, she knows it herself. She was an actress, She knows the anxiety, performance anxiety, man. That's a tough thing, you know. So a few years ago, 3 years ago now, it goes fast, but I was at death's door. I had terrible health problems.
Really?
I had cancer, had a tumor in my body.
Wow.
9 by 12 inches in my stomach that I had no idea was there. And, you know, I was doing some sit-ups, and I talked to Sue, my wife. I said, "Something feels funny there. It just feels like it's a bone where a bone shouldn't be." I said, "Feel it?" And she said, "Yeah, you ought to see a doctor." I said, No, it doesn't hurt. We're going to Montana, you know.
Yeah.
So I went to Montana for 2 or 3 months. And had a great time. My shins itched, and I had night sweats, but I thought it's summer, you know. Those are all symptoms of lymphoma, man.
Wow.
So I had this giant thing in my stomach, and I was just about to go back to do the second season of The Old Man, this TV show. And I said, I better get it checked out. So I go there, and you have lymphoma. That's a giant lymphoma there. So they put me in the hospital, and they did all these tests and stuff. And it was an unusual form of lymphoma, and they finally found the right cocktail for it. Now I'm in chemo, doing the chemo sessions, and it seemed to be working. I said, oh, that's great. And then I get a letter from the chemo place. You may have been exposed to COVID. And that proved to be true, and the COVID made the cancer look like nothing, man, because I had no immune system. You know, the chemo stripped my immune system, and the COVID just kicked my ass, man. Wow. So I was on death's door, you know. And what I found sitting at the doorstep there, where you pull out all your tricks, man, all your spiritual, philosophic, you know, tools that you can. And the one that gave me the most succor was, remember, have fun and don't take it too seriously.
Amazing.
And I just thought, that's right. Everybody's dying. This is me doing that. Yeah. Feel all the love that's coming from all those nurses, from your family, all your friends, how much love you feel coursing through your body.
Yeah.
You know?
That attitude probably had as much to do with you being well now as anything the doctors did.
Maybe so.
That sounds like healing medicine.
Oh, gosh. Isn't that wild? So my mom, I mean, I could go on and on about both my parents. They were quite remarkable.
Did going through that health trauma change anything in your life after it?
When you go through something like that, it's a big hit, not a hit like this, but like a hit of, some kind of drug. It takes you to a certain place.
Yeah. And
that lasts for a while, and then it starts to dissipate, and you kind of get back to so-called normal.
Yeah. And you feel like yourself now.
Now you say that, of course not. It's like, I'm developing this camera with my wife now, and I take these Widelux pictures, and photography was a big thing for me growing up. That's the thing about photography, this miracle, taking pictures, capturing light and shadows.
Like a magic trick.
Yeah, like a magic trick. It's funny, making movies, I always thought there's magic tricks and then there's real magic, or I guess you could call them miracles.
Yeah.
But then when you look around, miracle, that's kind of a normal thing, man. I mean, this is all miraculous.
Yeah, every day.
Every day. And photography, whether it's through the lens or just realizing that each moment, these little ordinary moments are extraordinary.
As nutrition science advanced through the mid-20th century, researchers began to understand that modern eating patterns, limited variety, processed foods, and time constraints could leave small but meaningful gaps in daily micronutrient intake. Today, large population studies confirm that approximately 90% of adults fall short on one or more essential vitamins or minerals. AG1 was formulated in response to those findings. Each daily serving provides more than 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced nutrients, including vitamins A, C, E, B6, B12, magnesium, zinc, selenium, and iodine. A scientifically developed formula backed by nutrition research and delivered in forms the body can readily access. Because utilization depends on absorption, AG1 also contains probiotics to support gut health and digestive function, helping the body make effective use of what it receives. AG1 contains no gluten or dairy, uses no genetically modified ingredients or artificial sweeteners, and is suitable for a wide range of dietary approaches, including plant-based, paleo, keto, and low-carbohydrate diets. Available in single-serving packets for when you're on the go. Manufactured under strict quality controls, every batch of AG1 is tested to confirm its composition, nutrient levels, and the absence of contaminants, ensuring reliability from one serving to the next. It's no wonder AG1 is trusted by the world's top athletes and experts. What was once a futuristic concept, daily nutritional support in a glass, is now the result of applied science. Learn more at drinkag1.com/Petra. Do it today.
Tell me how the camera came to be.
Well, I first came in contact with the Widelux. Maybe you had this experience too in high school. There was a rumor going around that the guy who was going to take the class picture had this camera that panned, and if you ran around real quick, you could be in the picture twice. Do you remember anything like that?
No, I don't remember this at all.
So, and that rumor proved to be true. It was
it's a still camera.
It's a still camera
that pans.
So it's like
inside.
Yeah, inside.
It doesn't move.
No, it's not. The shutter isn't. The shutter is a slit that pans across and exposes the film.
I see.
And then when I got married in '77, this guy, Mark Hanauer, came to our wedding. You're here just in the Malibu Hills up here off Las Flores and Rambla Pacifica, you know. And he took these pictures with this Widelux camera. I saw those pictures. I said, oh my God, what is this? This is remarkable. And then my wife gave me one. And that's the only camera I've used from then on.
Wow.
And, you know, back in high school, I had a dark room, you know, turned my bathroom, you know, put tinfoil and got the red light and the tunes, you know, you'd listen, you know, all the Beatles and Dylan and Bach and all the Miles, all the great jazz. You know, music was a big part of the darkroom experience. You'd be in there what you thought was an hour, but it turned out to be 6 hours because you're so deep, you know, so focused. My wife became a professional photographer, and we had built a darkroom up in Malibu, really into it. And then I started making these little books for the cast and crew. Karen Allen, it was her idea when we were doing Starman. And she said, let's make a book. So Charlie Martin Smith and Karen and I made this book for the cast and crew with my photographs and also Sid Baldwin, who was the still photographer on the show. And everybody seemed to like it. And I loved it because I was talking about that miracle. You know, I look at these pictures and I'm transported right back to those times, you know. So as much as it was a gift to them, it was a gift to myself. And I started making these books. I think I've made about 30 of these books now.
Wow.
I just did an exhibit of my photographs up in Santa Barbara, the Tamsin Gallery, and my daughter Jessie was the host. And,
Great.
you know, so we jammed on that. And one of her questions, she says, "Yeah, Dad, and there's a guy who shows up in every book." And I said, "It's not me. You know, I would take some selfies with it. It's a great camera for selfies because." Well, you know, I like to take selfies where I'm not looking at the camera. So, you know, I mean, if we took one here, I'd be like this, and I'd position it so you can't even see my arm, you know, like that. This is before selfies kind of became a thing. She says, "It's not you, Dad. Who is it?" And of course, I know who it is. It's Lloyd Catlett.
Who's that?
Lloyd Catlett is this guy. We've made over 70 films together. I met him in 1969. He was this young 16-year-old kid who was in The Last Picture Show. And he was hired as an actor. He had a good part in the movie, but also to teach us California kids how to be Texas, you know, how to be Texans. And he fell in love with the circus. You know, when we left town, he was right on our heels.
Yeah.
And then he became my stand-in and acted in movies with me and stand-in. But I have this thread through all of the movies. Can you imagine, man?
So cool.
And, you know, like we were talking about our memory, how shitty our memory is. He's got a much better memory than I have. So I said, "What's that guy's name?" Boom, he's got it, you know. I say, "Remember that?" "Yeah, man," we laugh, you know, together. So that has been just a real gift.
Do you photograph out in the world as well?
I've got quite a few photographs, you know, that aren't on movie sets, but that's kind of my specialty, you know. One of the things I think is valuable about my photographs is that I'm in a unique position right in the center of making movies.
Yeah.
The latter part of the 20th century, early part of the 21st century, with this weird camera, this unique camera. So that's kind of and there's a historical aspect to it because everything is changing so fast, man, with all this AI.
Walk me through from the beginning to now, all of the changes that you saw happen in making films.
Oh, man. Well, so my first movie was a movie called Halls of Anger. It might have been Rob Reiner's first movie, too. He was in it, an actor in it.
How old were you at the time?
Maybe 19. And it was all about busing white kids into a black school, which was a pretty interesting subject, you know, so white people could kind of feel what prejudice feels like. That was the idea. And I played the white kid who was trying to integrate, and the black kids kept beating the shit out of me. And there was a scene where I've been trying to do it, and the kids keep beating me up. And then the boys' vice principal, who was played by Calvin Lockhart, he says, "You've got to go back. You've got to keep going on this." And it was a very emotional scene, for me. I had just ended a love affair. Do you remember your first, what that feels like, your heart breaking? It was a terrible feeling. It lasted for years. And I was able to do some thespian judo with that feeling.
Yeah.
And take it for this thing. And I kicked ass in the sea. I remember they shot everyone else's piece, and then they got to my thing. And it made me think, I told you about talking to my dad, saying, I'm not sure if I'm cut out for that. And I said, shit, I think I could do this, man. This is pretty wild. And I got very emotional and cried and all this stuff. Get an applaud from the crew. That's always hot. And now we're the premiere of the show in Watts, I think. My dad's on my right, Bo's on my left. And I'm sitting back here saying, okay, now wait till you see this fucking scene. And here it comes. And the way they cut it, they cut to my face, and I'm like, and
you didn't see the build-up.
There was no build. The audience burst out laughing. I think I might have shit a little bit, so I just, it laid a little. I was so, it was just so terrible.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting lesson, man. That was like, so what do you do about that? How do you do? Do you protect yourself? Do you give it up? What do you do? And my choice was, no, you got to give it up, man. You can't be worried about it. That's one of the elements of making movies. It's a collage, and the collage ain't up to you. It's up to who's ever cutting the film.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's the director. And every once in a while, you had high expectations going in, and now it's even better what they do. That happens, and sometimes it don't, man. And so you can't protect yourself. You can't.
So how do you control?
You can control it in certain ways, but it's self-defeating because it dampens the whole energy of creativity, So that was a big thing for me. That really, about editing,
Yeah.
Now I'm getting off track a little bit more, but I'm going to go with the editing aspect. Bo's first movie was with Hal Ashby.
Wow.
Hal's last movie was my movie.
Incredible.
8 Million Ways to Die. Hal was an editor. Think of his films, Being There, Coming Home, Last Detail, man, these masterpieces. And he worked through improvisation. It's interesting where the directors come from. Some are actors like Sidney Lumet.
Yep.
Some are, writers. Some are editors.
Mm-hmm.
So Hal said, just bring it up, give me all your shit, and
then he'd figure out how to make it into something.
He would make it into something.
That's great.
I remember asking him, I said, are we gonna have to do much looping, much ADR stuff? And he goes, no. I said, what do you mean? He says, I'm an editor, Jim. I said, what do you mean? He says, man, I get in there with a little razor blade and I can, this is on the old school shit,
Yeah.
And he was
physical.
Yeah, he was a master at this stuff. I remember him saying the key to editing is just bathing in the film. He would sleep in the editing room, and just look at it over and over and over again. But you think of like that monologue that John Voight gives in Coming Home, that's improv, man. That's and I think I have a feeling that you might work the same way. T-Bone does as well. Creating the space, it's hard for people to understand what that is, but that's my favorite kind of directors. And you guys are directors too.
We have no idea when we're going in what it's going to be, no clue. And there's a lot of different versions of good,
Oh, yeah.
And you don't know until you're discovering it.
It's a funny talent when you have a visitor come in and watch you at work. They say, well, he's not doing anything. What is he doing? It's space creation. It's just safety, vibe, playfulness, joy, humor, love. Let it do us.
Yeah, watch it unfold.
Yeah.
It's a great feeling.
The miracle, man.
It is.
I mean, my task as a creative person is getting out of the way, right? How do you practice doing that? How do you get in that spot? That's an interesting, practice to mess with. But Hal So Bo did his first movie, Landlord. I did his second, 8 Million Ways to Die. I think it was Andy Garcia's first film. We had a ball working together. There was a guy, Mark Damon was the producer. And Hal had a bad rep right around that time, doing coke. And it was, I think he had done that Stone documentary or something. He just, had a bad reputation. And so the script was just a basic outline. We would never shoot the script. We would just jam on the essence of the scene. And this guy had no faith in Hal's process. I mean, look at the pudding that's coming out of Hal's oven. These are masterpieces. So he bitched and bitched. I can understand how it would frustrate the financiers to say, that's not the script, man, Where are you going to go with this thing, So he comes in, we've got, about 2 weeks to go shoot. He comes in and he says, we're pulling the plug today. This is your last day. Hal says, what are you talking about? We've got major stuff. Hal went into his trailer, burned a doob, I think, came out and said, all right, here's how we're going to do a phone call. Andy, you're going to have this big, long phone call. He didn't let it crush him. He didn't say,
No, he solved the problem.
He just, because that's basically what movies, it's all about. These, trying to figure out how we navigate these challenges, So there is a challenge. So he came up with this long monologue. And he created the kind of space of such safety and inclusion that I saw Andy, doing the scene, and I had an idea about what would make it better for Andy. And I went up to him, I said, Hal, what if Andy, did this instead of that? And he goes, that's a really good idea. But let Andy cross the bridge. Let him find that out. My idea came from the idea, we got a time crunch here. We got a lot of stuff. And he said, we got all the time in the world, God, the vibe he created. So we actually shot the movie with all that hindrance. We shot the movie, Hal and mine. Then the guy fired Hal, didn't let him edit the film, man, and just cut it against the grain.
Unbelievable.
And then Hal died. I mean, he broke his heart, man. God. Now,
crazy story.
I remember your question was how has it changed over the years? That kind of has remained the same. These stories that, it's a communal art form, you're working with other guys that, can shut you down and, it's up for grabs, how it's going to turn out. I love this thing. This is what keeps me coming back, is that when it transcends your high expectations, and it does that every once in a while.
Yeah, it's the best feeling.
Isn't it a great feeling? I was going with, and God, look what happened. That is so amazing. So that kind of stuff, those editing stories, that still happens, the good and the bad of that. But when you ask me what's changed, a great example of that is Tron. I've had great luck with first-time directors, just wonderful. Some of my best movies have been first-time guys. But this was Steven Lisberger, who came up with this idea of Tron. We shot it in black and white, 70 millimeter black and white, all hand-tinted by these Korean women. All our costumes were in black and white. We would go into this black and white box, this sound stage. The special effect, everything was black duvetine with white adhesive tape. That was our special effects, Then they did it all in post, color stuff and made it glow and shit. And then you'd go outside after being in that black and white, and color, oh my gosh, color would hit you like a ton of bricks. So now we're down the second one. I'm scanned, they do a scan so they can jack with me, digitally. And they did that. And so that's basically what the first movie was all about, getting scanned into a computer. Now it's happening in real time. And so I could play a younger version of myself, but it was kind of primitive. I thought I looked more like Bill Maher than I did myself. It didn't matter that much. Now the whole AI stuff is so much more advanced. In the sequel to Tron, we had all these dots on our faces, and now they don't do any of that. Now it's here. So just that is leaps and bounds, what that AI does.
Yeah.
And it's amazing now, just the whole AI idea, because in movies, I remember seeing Jurassic Park for the first time. You see, look what they can do, or seeing the Hobbit movies. Look at all the people. And then finally, it loses its punch.
Humanity,
because it's just, and you say, still, it's an interesting tool that, you can use, but it loses something. Pretty soon I'll be out of gig, man. I mean, that, what? I'll probably lease my image. Say we want a combo De Niro, Bridges, and let's put some Andy Garcia in there. See what happens. A little more Garcia, a little more. I mean, that's not too far off. I mean, they can do it already. You know.
Yeah.
LMNT, Element Electrolytes. Have you ever felt dehydrated after an intense workout or a long day in the sun? Do you want to maximize your endurance and feel your best? Add Element Electrolytes to your daily routine. Perform better and sleep deeper. Improve your cognitive function. Experience an increase in steady energy with fewer headaches and fewer muscle cramps. Element Electrolytes. Drink it in the sauna. Refreshing flavors include grapefruit, citrus, watermelon, and chocolate salt. Formulated with the perfect balance of sodium, potassium, and magnesium to keep you hydrated and energized throughout the day. These minerals help conduct the electricity that powers your nervous system so you can perform at your very best. Element Electrolytes are sugar-free, keto-friendly, and great tasting. Minerals are the stuff of life. So visit drinklmnt.com/tetra and stay salty with Element Electrolytes. LMNT.
How did you meet Bernie Glassman?
I'm at Ram Dass's birthday party. I make these little ceramic heads, and I do this thing where, I'll make a pot or a vase or something, and then I'll have a hunk of clay left over, and I'll let my hands make a head out of it. And they're like aspects of myself. This is something I do, and I've got, hundreds of these fuckers. So I went up to Ram Dass and I said, I've always wanted to give you a little head. Happy birthday. I give the head. And then we sit down there, and then there's this kind of tubby Jewish guy over on the left. He doesn't look like, I said, what is he doing here in this spirit? And he turns out to be the real thing. This guy's a Zen master, big time. Yeah. And he says, hey, I really dig Lebowski, man. I say, really, Berm? Oh. You signed Bernie Glassman, and I say, oh, well, tell me, what he is. Well, I'm all about bringing Buddhism into current times. And the Lebowski is just chock full of all these modern day koans, or koans that can apply to modern day. I said, what are you talking about? He says, well, look who wrote and directed Lebowski, the Koan brothers. I say, okay, good, very good, okay. He says, the dude abides. That's very Buddhistic right there. I say, yeah. He says, my favorite koan in Big Lebowski is, well, that's just like your opinion, man. I say, oh, I'm getting it now, A koan, well, you know what a koan is. What's the sound of one hand clapping? These questions that really don't have traditional answers to them. I said, give me another one. He says, well, shut the fuck up, Donnie. There's another koan. So he starts to list these things, and he says, hey, let's write a book. I say, what do you mean? He says, yeah, let's write a book about Lebowski and how it, might have some of these ideas, these Buddhist ideas in it. And I'm, kind of Buddhistly bent myself, big fan of Alan Watts, you must be. Yeah, he is probably the best. Isn't he so great? I mean, God. Yeah, he's my wife's favorite too because he's got a sense of humor about the whole thing.
Yeah.
He says, yeah, let's do this. I said, well, I've got a ranch up in Montana. Let's go up there for a couple of weeks and just hang, I you know how you hit it off with somebody very quickly and you say, wow. And so I hit it off with him just immediately. So we went up there and we just had 2 weeks of conversation. And then his wife, Eve Marco, edited it. And Bernie was, my dear friend and teacher, and God, what a guy, man. I mean.
Do you remember when you first read the script for Lebowski?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what you remember.
Yeah, I remember bumping into the Coen brothers. Maybe it was at a party or something, I can't remember. And they said, yeah, we've written something for you. I said, oh, you're kidding, great. No, I was a big fan.
I didn't know they wrote it for you.
Yeah, I was a big fan of Blood Simple.
Yeah.
And then I read the script and I said, wow, this is not like anything I've ever done before. Why did you think of me? It's like something from my past, kind of weird vibe.
Did you laugh out loud when you read the script?
Oh yeah. I mean, I thought I was amazed that when it first came out, it didn't do anything. It was not successful when it came out. It had to came back from Europe and it was successful over there and then splashed back here.
Mm-hmm. How much of what you read in the script is what the movie is, and how much did it evolve through making it?
Well, they write so well that it feels like improvisation, but it's not. And, Walter, John Goodman and I, we were very precise, about where each fuck was, each man was. I love pot. Was a pothead. I'm not doing it these days, but I didn't smoke any pot on that movie. Because I really wanted to be as clear and not, what's the acting term? Sense memory. I had done a lot of pot. I knew what that, I could get there without, having to smoke it, Now, we would do improvisation. John and I remember doing this to feel the vibe of the scene, and then we would always go back in the script. It was almost like music.
Yeah.
You want the right melody, you want the notes, and each man was there for.
But you would jam to better get into the script.
Yes, right. And oh man, it was man. I was talking about my photography, and I made a book for Lebowski, and I look through that book and I get right back to each of those scenes. The day Turturro comes, he's gonna do this one little scene, kissing the ball, and oh God, he was just so incredible.
When you were young, in addition to working with your dad, you got to work with a lot of the great actors. Do you remember any things that they directly told you that were helpful going forward?
Well, don't you love it when you've got these heroes of yours, and you put them on a pedestal, and when you meet them, they let you know, I'm just one of you guys.
Yeah, they're people.
You love that? I just love that, man. So my second film was a movie called The Yin and Yang of Mr. Go, written by Burgess Meredith.
Had he ever directed or written before?
Oh, he was, people are most familiar with him playing the Penguin in the original Batman TV series.
Yeah.
But he was a classical, I just watched.
And then in Rocky as well.
And Rocky, that's another, But he was a wonderful actor. And James Mason was also in that film. And he was, so down to earth. And Lolita, I just remember, all his great movies. And another story with James just popped into my mind. Working with John Huston. And I worked with him as an actor and as a director. I was in a movie that he directed called Fat City. My big brother, Bo, did some agenting for me. He went up for the part, and he was a little too old. He's 8 years older than me. He says, "But you ought to check out my brother." So I went in and did, see the casting guy, and they liked me. And then they got a call from my agent that John Huston wanted to meet me. Oh, great. Where? Madrid. Madrid, yeah. So I get on a plane, and where the meeting wants to be is at the Prado. So I get there, and I'm about, early 20s, and I'm checking into the hotel, and there's this beautiful girl there. We start to talk, and she says, "Take you out to dinner. Let's go have beautiful food, fish." So I say, well, I got to get home fairly early because I got this interview. So I go out with this beautiful girl, and we have a wonderful meal. I get home, get into bed, and I wake up with food poisoning. Man, it's just puking and shitting and just the worst. And I've got to meet John Huston at the Prado. So there I was, looking at the Goyas and all of these great, painters, Velasquez and so forth, trying my best not to puke on the paintings, man. I mean, I'm literally puking in my mouth and swallowing my,
Yeah, it's the worst feeling.
And John doesn't talk about the movie at all. He's just pointing out art to me. And I'm saying, well, I've lost that part. Oh, God, help me. I hope I don't die. I was just feeling just terrible. And I'm in bed, and I don't speak Spanish, and I can't talk on the phone to the desk and everything. I said, what am I going to do? And I get a knock on the door, and I crawl on my hands and knees to the door and open the door, and who's standing there? James Mason. "What are you doing on the floor, Griffith?" And he saved my life. He got me a doctor, got the right shot and stuff.
He still cast you for the movie after the food poisoning.
I got the part. Yeah, I got the part, man. And it was with Stacy Keach, a wonderful actor.
Yeah, great.
Susan Terrell and Candy Clark, who I fell in love with, and we became we lived together for many years. And John, he was kind of, not feeling well. Actually, he was would have these, on oxygen all the time. There was a scene, it was my favorite scene in the movie, where I'm having a dream, and I wake up in the middle of the dream, having dreamt that my wife, Candy, was holding the hand of my best friend. And so I said, "Don't touch me." I'm pissed off. I'm still in the dream, but I'm awake. And there was a certain comedic element to this whole thing. And my approach was, the more serious I could play it, the funnier it would be. And John had some other ideas, and I was trying to do it with him. And we saw dailies the next day. And Ray Stark, who the producer, was in there. And after the dailies, he was walking with me. He said, "What do you think?" I said, "No, I didn't really like it." He goes, "Yeah, I know." He says, "But don't worry. When we're through shooting, I'm going to have you and Candy take acting lessons, and then we'll come back and reshoot the scene." And that kind of hit me weird because I had already been nominated for an Academy Award.
Yeah.
But I said, okay. So that's what happened. And Jeff Corey was an acting teacher, pretty tough acting teacher, having to, really get the emotion out of you. I was living with Candy at the time, and we would go like twice a week to this acting teacher. And Candy would say, she had to cry and say, "I don't want to go, Jeff. I don't want to cry." I said, "Come on, Ken, this is what acting's all about. You got to do the hard." So we would go, and he'd make her cry every time, And now we're kind of come back to reshoot the thing. We were instructed by Ray, don't tell anything to John about taking any lessons or anything. And Candy goes to John and says, I'm not supposed to say this, but we've been taking these acting lessons, and I don't know how to play the part. I don't know how to do it. And John said, just do it the way you did it before. Just do it the way you did it before.
Great.
Knowing full well that it would never be in the movie anyway.
Yeah.
And we shot the scene, and it was, never in the movie. But now, years later, I'm doing a movie called Winter Kills, and John Huston's playing my father. Directed, again, I mentioned having great luck with first-time directors. This was Bill Richard. The cast of this movie, John Huston, Elizabeth Taylor, Toshiro Mifune,
wow.
Sterling Hayden, Richard Boone. It's amazing. And he got this cast together just through his sheer charisma. He was a wonderful guy, John Huston was playing my father. And John, when we were doing Fat City, I was always jealous of Stacy because John and Stacy were playing backgammon and so forth, and I kind of felt left out. And I think, that was the way he wanted to direct me, keep me on my heels.
Yeah.
And then doing this Winter Kills, he not only was very open and gregarious with me, but he was also, to this first-time director, he was like showing how an actor should behave to a director. He would say, how was it, Bill? How was it for you? Should I, any ideas? Would you like me to do differently?
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. So that was, great experience.
Wasn't Winter Kills banned or something? Something happened with Winter Kills.
Oh, God. Oh, another actor that was in it was who played in Psycho, Anthony Perkins.
Yeah.
He was in it. He played the bad guy in it. And this is such a weird story. So Bo had done a movie with Anthony Perkins, a Larry McMurtry story called Love and Molly, directed by Sidney Lumet. Tony did acid every day. And one of his acting techniques was what drug would be appropriate for this thing. So we're doing this scene at the climax of the movie where he's kidnapped my girlfriend, and I've got to take his arm, and I have a blackjack in my hand. I break his arm. I say, tell me where she is. I'm going to break your other arm. Tell me where she is. So he says, for this scene, I think amyl nitrate. So the director goes out and gets a box of Amy's, and, rolling first time, are you ready? Okay, action. Yeah. And he's got this long 2-page monologue, and he hits it, and he does it beautifully.
Wow.
He just does the whole thing.
Wow.
Right? Now it gets to my side, and I said, I think I'll do an Amy. And I hit that poor guy so fucking hard with that fake blackjack that, shut down the day's work,
That's crazy.
Oh, God, it was terrible. And I don't know if it was the same day or maybe it was the reshot of that thing. The stage doors, these big doors open to the sound stage, and in come the union guys and shut us down because all the cast and crew wasn't being paid their union dues. And they were all just there because of the love of this guy, Bill Richard had.
Yeah.
And so they shut us down.
Wow.
And we had major scenes to shoot. And, it kind of, again, broke all our hearts. And a few weeks later, I get a call from Bill. I got this idea, man. I said, what? He says, what we're going to do, I've written this script. It's a great script, and you'll be just so perfect in it. We're going to shoot it in Germany. I've got the money. And then that's going to come out, and then we'll get the money to finish Winter Kills. And it's a great scene with Sterling Hayden that you're going to. And I said, okay. And off we go to Germany, shoot this other movie. And his prophecy proved true. We came in, finished Winter Kills.
Amazing.
I mean, just all these adventures, crazy.
So when Anthony Perkins does the amyl nitrate, you didn't think, this is crazy. You think, good idea, I'll do it too.
Oh, well, this is back in the day, man, I'm much younger, and the things like that, I thought of another drug story I might as well tell you. Doing Thunderbolt and Lightfoot with Clint Eastwood. This is, again, another great example of first-time directors. This was Mike Cimino's first time directing. This is the guy who directed The Deer Hunter and Heaven's Gate and so forth. And Clint is famous for only wanting one or two takes.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I was the young punk kid who said, I'd go up to Mike, I'd say, I got an idea in mind. And he said, well, you got to ask the boss, And he would go over there and talk to Clint, and Clint would say, yeah, give the cat a shot. So I really appreciate that, what Clint did. And then we're doing the scene. You ever see that movie?
Not in a long time.
But you've seen it at some point. At the end of the movie, I get kicked in the head by George Kennedy, and I'm having a stroke, and I die. Basically, it's a death scene. I had this idea. I said, if we get a dentist, get some Novocaine, and shoot Novocaine in my mouth, and just, go like that, and I'll be ready to fight, And he said, okay. So we did it. Worked great. Lost the film. We had to do it all over again and did the same thing again.
Lost the film?
Yeah, lost.
Physically lost the film?
Just, I can't remember. It was either lost or it was no good. We just had to reshoot it again. Now, years later, we're doing Heaven's Gate. He had just won the Academy Award for Deer Hunter. He was the darling of Hollywood. They said, do whatever you want, Mike. He said, well, I've got this epic Western I want to do. But he said, but I don't want any of the suits or any press to come because it's going to be a challenging thing to do it. And everybody who was in it, I can't remember, I think it was maybe 6 months shooting. That's where I met T-Bone on here. T-Bone played my maid in the thing. And Willem Dafoe, it was his first movie. He played those were my housekeeping guys. Willem, I think, got fired for laughing inappropriately in a scene in one just hanging out when Mike was directing. And it was a very interesting experience because unlike what it was with Thunderbolt and Lightfoot was, 1 or 2 takes, Mike would do 60 takes.
Wow.
I mean, it was like, let's show up, we'll be in costume. If we get it, we get it. If we don't, we'll just come back and we'll do it again. So they never knew when it counted. And I guess from his point of view, he's looking for that happy accident, that one little thing. But from the acting thing, it was kind of tough because you don't know when does it count?
Yeah.
When is it?
And it's hard to make it count 60 times.
Yeah. And is everybody going to do it together? Or, it was, challenging that way. Now we're doing this battle scene. And I'm supposed to get shot. And then I give a big speech. And I go up to Mike and I say, Mike, I'm being shot here and there's a medic there, What if the medic shoots me up with some morphine and then I give my speech? And he goes, yeah. And I said, but I know he's got some morphine, but before we do it on film, I want to see if I can do that. So how do you feel about him shooting me up with the morphine and then I'll try to do the scene? And he said, you just want to get high on the morphine. I say, yeah, but I really think it might be effective, for the movie as well. And so I get the real doctor there and he shoots me up with the morphine and I do this thing and I say, oh, this is great. I can do this. It's a good effect.
Yeah.
Now we're going to shoot it on film. And now we're doing it with the actor and he's got he's talked to the medic and he's going to do it. And we practiced it and shit and he does it. And it's just terrible, man. It's not morphine. It's some other shit. It's some like methadone. I don't know what he was shooting me. These are back in the days when we experimented with drugs, you know.
So much of today's life happens on the web. Squarespace is your home base for building your dream presence in an online world. Designing a website is easy, using one of Squarespace's best-in-class templates. With the built-in style kit, you can change fonts, imagery, margins, and menus, so your design will be perfectly tailored to your needs. Discover unbreakable creativity with Fluid Engine, a highly intuitive drag-and-drop editor. No coding or technical experience is required. Understand your site's performance with in-depth website analytics tools. Squarespace has everything you need to succeed online. Create a blog, monetize a newsletter, make a marketing portfolio, launch an online store. The Squarespace app helps you run your business from anywhere. Track inventory and connect with customers while you're on the go. Whether you're just starting out or already managing a successful brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create and customize a beautiful website. Visit squarespace.com/Tetra and get started today.
I remember reading a story you told about if it's in church, you're not in the service.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
19 years old, really ripe for Vietnam. And I followed my brother's footsteps. He enlisted in the Coast Guard Reserve. And in the Coast Guard Reserve, you go to, regular old boot camp. Boot camp is 10 weeks. Wow. I can remember going there in your civilian clothes on a bus, arriving there. We all get lined up. And the guy who is in charge of us, he's walking up and down the lines questioning us, what's your name? He goes up to one kid saying, what's your name? My name is Joe Samuel, sir. Quit moving your fucking head. Why are you moving your head like that? I don't know, sir. Don't fucking move your head. Yes, sir. Now there's a guy in the line behind him who starts to laugh, like this. And the drill guy goes over to that guy and says, you like laughing, asshole? I want you to continue to laugh until I tell you to stop. You understand? Asshole. Yes, sir. Start laughing. Ha, 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 ha. Now this is now hours later and we're up in our racks, 2 o'clock in the morning. Still,
Wow.
I mean, it was torture, basically. They strip you they give you a number, strip you from your identity, I guess that's effective for fighting battles and shit, working for the team, get rid of your individuality. And now where it's about the second week and we're all, stripped down, we're kind of been bashed around. And the guy says to us, all right, assholes, today's Sunday. You have a choice to make. You can go to church or you can high-point rifles on the grounder. How many people want to go to church? So we often go to church. And the guy in there, Don Harris, was the chaplain. And he said, I want to start today by telling you guys that when you're in here, you're not in the military. You're in the house of the Lord. Praise God. Hallelujah, All his sermons were all about dealing with tough times and, and love and all these things. He had me play my guitar and sing to the troops, and he would have discussions with all the guys and everything. A remarkable guy. Turned me on to an incredible book Are you into Kazantzakis at all? Do you know who he is? His most famous book is Zorba the Greek. Mm-hmm. But he also wrote The Last Temptation of Christ. He would rewrite like the New Testament, his version. Why not? Why can't I be tapped in like that? And they're remarkable stories. The Last Temptation of Christ, it's a big, thick book. The last half of it is a dream that Jesus has on the cross.
Wow.
Of being a normal person, have 2 wives, all these kids. And then he wakes up. Yeah, I mean, it's a great book. Marty Scorsese made a movie about it. And he turned me on to a wonderful book that I can't recommend high enough called The Saviors of God. That if anybody's going to save anybody, we've got to save God. And it's quite an amazing book. And during that time, I got into a Christian phase in my spiritual journey. And so I really appreciated all of that.
Yeah.
Especially, when you're in tough times, you pull out all your trick. What's going to help me, man?
Yeah.
And that's, what helped me, that kind of stuff. So I really appreciated that. Then we got Honor Company about in the 9th week we were there. All the companies get it at some point. We got Honor Company, and that means we were on leave and we could go into San Francisco. And he said, I'm going to break the rules, Jeff. I said, what? He says, I want to take you somewhere. I said, where? He says, I'm going to break the rules. I'm going to give you some civvies so you won't pop out. And he gave me these civilian clothes, and he took me to the Carousel Ballroom to see Jefferson Airplane.
Wow.
And Big Brother.
Wow.
Right.
Amazing.
And I just, that was all fresh. That was all fresh music at the time. I just went, holy shit. And then he ended up, many, many years later, ended up marrying me and Sue. So Don Harris, wonderful, wonderful guy. My wife, I'm going on 50 years, man. And the love thing just gets stronger and stronger. And we've been doing these movies together for so long. So she knows what it takes and how to
How'd you guys meet?
me. We met on a movie. We met on a movie called Rancho Deluxe up in Montana. I'm doing a scene in this dude ranch called Chico Hot Springs. I'm in this big hot tub, natural hot spring. Sam Waterston on one side, Harry Dean Stanton on the other, and we're doing a scene. And I look over and I see this girl. I cannot take my eyes off her. She is so gorgeous. And she's got 2 black eyes and a broken nose. So this beauty juxtaposed to this disfigurement, man. It was just so amazing, And I finally get the nerve to ask her out. And I don't know about you, but asking girls out, man, that was always tough.
Terrifying.
I don't know, huh?
Terrifying.
Yeah. So I was so attracted, I couldn't help it. And I said, after we were shooting that, I said, would you like to go out with me? She says, no. It's a small town, maybe I'll see you around. I say, okay. And then her prophecy proved true, and we had the rap party, and she was there, and we danced and felt, boom, that was it. Got married, had a bunch of kids. Now we cut 30 years later, and I'm going through my mail, and I get a letter from the makeup man on that show. And he says, I was going through my files, and I found a picture of you asking a local girl out. It's 2 pictures, a close-up and a 2-shot of the first words
it's unbelievable.
we ever spoke.
Unbelievable.
And me asking her out and her saying no. Click.
Unbelievable.
Isn't that wild, man?
That's great.
And so that's my prized possession. After this thing, I can show you that picture.
Yeah, I want to see.
Maybe remember.
Have you ever done theater?
Yeah.
What's that like?
With my dad.
Oh, really?
We did summer stock. He did Guys and Dolls. That was one of the things he would do around. He would do a lot. Remember, I was on stage with this other woman. My dad's entering the stage, and I see him walking down the aisle, and he's fucking with his zipper, he comes on and I see his zipper is just totally off the track and it's just open like this, and the people start laughing and shit. And my dad, breaks the fourth wall, says, okay, I'm going to go up and change my pants. Jeff, entertain the people. And so I'm up there, all alone. And I said, well, I took some tap lessons. I'm going to do a little tap routine for you now, it gets, just so bizarre sometimes.
It's an unbelievable story.
Yeah.
Do you think your dad felt like you can handle this?
Yeah. I just had to,
Is it like the show must go on?
Yeah, that's exactly it. The show must go on. Yeah. Working with him on these two movies as an adult with Blown Away, I got to work with him. It was quite a big part. We had so much fun pretending, with your dad on that level.
Did it tap into things from childhood? Did you feel like you were reliving your childhood doing that with him?
It's sort of like an extension. It's not, because it wasn't even reliving. It was just like an extension because I'm thinking of a couple of things. Coming from a showbiz family, we were encouraged as kids to perform, do, shows and plays and stuff. I remember I just saw this recently. So wild. I did a movie called The Giver, based on this book. And I tried to get it made for, easy 20 years. And I just saw this, a home movie, where I cast my dad as the giver. I ended up playing the part 20 years later, but I cast my dad as the giver. Bo's kid was playing the lead in it. And it was shot in our house. Bud Cort was narrating, reading the book, the whole book. And we did the whole book. And Casey, Bo's son, shot it. Then another example is my folks had a place in Bear Valley up in central Northern California, ski place. And we were up there and my dad was, pretty old, in his 80s. He didn't like getting old, man. It pissed him off. He was such a vital guy, and to have his body breaking down like that, it really annoyed him. And he's locked himself in his room. And we're saying, Dad, come on, are you okay? He says, leave me alone. I'm in here. I'm working. What are you working on? Leave me alone. Now, hours pass, and he finally comes out, and he says, Bo's son, Dylan, gathered us all around a table. And I have Widelux shots of this whole story I'm going to tell you. He says, Dylan has asked me to write a script based on Robin Hood. I've called the story The Robin of Bear, since we were in Bear Valley. I want you all to participate in it. I've cast it certain ways. I'm going to direct this, and I want you to do this in a very professional way. He was very serious about it. Casey, I want you to shoot it. And so we have this document with special effects. I mean, this Robin Hood, he was like pulled behind a snow machine, it's, fake fights, very elaborate and funny. And, we had such a great time. My wife, Sue, got so pissed off at my dad because he had my daughters, they were playing peasants out in the snow, and they didn't have proper clothes on. And Sue would say, can't you put jackets? No, this is a period piece, No, just, and so real fights, happen, real family fights. I'm trying to do something,
Yeah.
And then Bo and I, would come in there and have ideas and, try to direct it. So it was just hysterical. The combination of, humor and seriousness. And
I love the fact that your dad took it serious.
Oh, yeah,
That's beautiful.
Yeah, but he was also, this is the guy who did Airplane. You've seen the movie Airplane, so he's an incredible. I mentioned the movie Blown Away, talking to the producers about the casting. And I said, who could play my uncle in this thing? He's a great actor, and he looks a bit like me, you know, in a way, is Lloyd Bridges. Do you know Lloyd Bridges? And the guy says, oh, your dad, that's funny, but he's really more of a comedic actor. I say, what the fuck are you talking about?
He saw Airplane.
Then this was coming out.
Yeah.
I say, my dad is an actor, man.
Yeah.
That was an act.
Yeah.
You know?
That's really.
And so I said, what, do you want him to come in and read? Oh, would he do that? Oh, shit. Okay. So my dad came in, of course.
Blew him away.
Blew him away.
Yeah.
That's something that I learned from my dad, too, is these personas that you can develop. You know, like he did Sea Hunt. He was so good in Sea Hunt playing this
You
skin
think
dive.
that's him.
You think that's him. And he got
Typecasting.
Typecasting. And he got those kinds of parts over and over. And so I thought when I started my acting career, I said, I'm going to really go about trying to shake up my characters and not duplicate
Because you
it.
didn't want to just do one thing.
Yeah, yeah. And that served me well, too.
That's great.
Yeah.
There's a long tradition of reading sacred text slowly, allowing each word to settle, echo, and reveal meaning over time. Rather than rushing to conclusions, this practice invites reflection, listening, and attention. For centuries, this repetition has been used to stay close to wisdom, not by studying words as information, but by receiving them as something lived and experienced over and over again. This tradition is known as Lectio Divina. Emerging in early monastic life, it engages scripture through 4 gentle movements: reading, reflection, repetition, and rest. A short passage is read. A single phrase is held. Silence becomes part of the practice, creating space for insight to surface naturally. Lectio 365 brings that ancient rhythm into the present moment. Designed for modern life, it offers brief, guided scriptural reflections throughout the day. To begin with intention, pause at midday, and wind down at night. The readings are less about information gathering and more for returning to wisdom again and again, letting familiar words meet new moments. A modern way to keep biblical wisdom close, quietly present, steady, and alive within everyday life. Lectio 365 is a free resource. Find inspiration there, now and always. Learn more at lectio365.com.
So tell me about your relationship to music from your earliest memory of music.
So Bo, who's 8 years older than I am, coming out of his bedroom was Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Buddy Holly, the Platters, you know, all the Bird groups. I mean, that's what I was hearing. The Everly Brothers, I'm thinking that was probably the first record that I read was, you know, wake up, little Susie, wake up. God, they were so great, weren't they?
Incredible.
The tone, those
harmony.
Guys. And the guitar sound, like Claudette, that guitar, God, so good. And then he had a Dan Electro, a white Dan Electro that I kind of adopted and started to write tunes on. And then in high school, I was never in a band, but I had these friends that were in bands and were all good musicians. And the senior year of high school, my friend Steve Boehm, who's a drummer, started to have these jams over at his house. No songs allowed, but singing was encouraged and writing on the spot was encouraged.
So all
but
improv.
It was a jam, all improv.
Great.
And he recorded every session. And that's the only music he listened to. And we did that for maybe 20 years, meeting over at his house, with these jam sessions, and they were, parties, and they would turn, each one had its own flavor, but he recorded everything. Talking about my dad and acting, and sometimes I thought, I'm not sure if I want to do this acting thing, maybe the music thing, that kind of thing. And then I thought, as the acting started to take off, I said, well, maybe I can combine the two. Wouldn't it be wonderful to play a musician and to play music? Yeah, that would be great. And I'd think about it. And sure enough, the universe supplied this script by this young guy, Scott Cooper, first-time director, first-time screenwriter, called Crazy Heart. And I read the script, and it was good. I said, that's good. But there's no music in it. If there's music, it's lousy.
It's about a musician, but there's no music in it.
There's no music. And I said, well, that, so I turned it down, and he would keep coming at me. Years, I'm talking 2 or 3 years. Bob Duvall was his champion. So I'm walking down the street one day, and I bump into my old buddy, T-Bone, who's walking down the street. He says, what do you think about this script, Crazy Heart? I say, well, there's no music to it, man. And he says, that's the easy part. Don't worry about that. I say, easy part? What are you talking about? He said, yeah, we can figure that out. And then he made a beautiful direction. He said, it's like, you're one of the outlaws, like what, Johnny Cash, Willie and Chris and Waylon, But you don't have to copy those guys. We're making a movie about an ulterior universe. Isn't that a beautiful thought?
Right.
It's like, it's not this planet. It's like, looks like here, but it's somewhere else. I said, that's interesting. And then my heart started to beat. I said, shit, this could actually happen. And then I got in touch with the safety dreams have. And when you bring your dream into real life, you can fail. Dreams, you can't fail. It's dream. I said, how can I pull this off? I was panicky. But the universe dealt me cards. I said, here's my dear friend who's who's so talented.
Yeah.
And he says, it's easy. How can I turn this down? And you say, yeah, but you're afraid, Joe. Yeah, but fuck. What else is there to do? How can I live with myself and turn? So I went in with that spirit. And I got my dear friend, John Goodwin, we go back to the 4th grade, making music and painting and doing all kinds of art together. And I said, can I bring John on? And people said, yeah, sure. So he came on. He ended up writing Hold on You, which was the opening song for that movie. And then T-Bone brought Stephen Bruton. Did you ever meet Stephen or know about him at all? Who was T-Bone's best friend. They go back as teenagers. And Stephen was my guide through the whole thing. Every day he went to work with us the whole time. T-Bone wasn't on the set so much, but Stephen was there teaching me, more advanced guitar, what it was like being a traveling musician. That opening scene where I pull into the bowling lane to play a gig. Stephen said, now when I'm traveling around like this, I don't pull off to the side of the road to piss. I carry a sparkless bottle and I just pee in the sparkless bottle. So why don't you do that? And then, so he kept the authenticity. He was our touch base. We rewrite scenes, all kinds of things to get it as real as possible. It's interesting that there are many different kinds of directors, but 2 major schools are hot directors and cool directors. Both are very effective. Scott is a hot director in that he's very passionate and excited and enthusiastic. Great, man. Oh, you nailed it, man. You want one more? You want to do it again? Okay, let's see what you can do. Come on. It's like that. Example of the cooler directors would be the Coen brothers, which is no big deal. Oh, yeah, you made me laugh. Yeah, that's good. Okay, now let me go over here and do, no big deal, which is another powerful statement,
Takes all the pressure off.
Yeah, there's just no big deal. And both of them are very, very effective. So Crazy Heart was great, and it was one of those examples where you have high expectations going in, and then they get transcended.
Wow.
And Scott just did such an incredible job putting that film together.
Yeah.
And Bobby Duvall, you know, being that young guy's champion, you know.
Yeah.
That's so important. You know, you think about, you know, people say, what do executive producers really do? You know, what do they, and there's all different kinds, you know, but to have a real producer behind you, creating the space and the support, you know. Mark Rosenberg, who championed Steve Clovis in The Fabulous Baker Boys, Steve wrote that script, I think, you know, when he was 24, 25. You know, it's a very, very good script. A lot of the major directors at the time wanted to direct that, and Mark Rosenberg said, no, this is the kids, you know. And he was there just doing that, you know. And I said to Steve, I said, you know, let's jam a bit so you can get your directing chops and I'll get my acting chops. So we met at my house for about a month, where we would meet with my brother, Bo, who's, you know, playing my brother, which was so, you know, God, what a dream. You know, if it was another actor, you'd figure out, how do we create this illusion? That no, that's handled, man. You didn't have to do any of that, you know. So to jam with my brother, oh God, what a blessing it was, and so much fun. So we'd meet over at my house, and Steve would get to, you know, direct us, you know, and he would come up with different improvs. And I remember one improv that was, he said, oh, this guy, he's good. He said, okay, here's the deal. Here's our improv. Jeff, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. You've climbed out of your bedroom window. You've gone to see Bill Evans, who's playing at this club. I'll play Bill Evans. I'll come out of the bathroom here. I'll just shot up in the bathroom. I'm going to come to the bar, and I'm going to bum a cigarette off you. And Bo, when I put my hand through my hair like this, you're the big brother. You're going to come and get Jeff out. And we did that improv for long, you know, 15, 20 minutes. And Steve was so good, you know, committing to what the assignment was. You know, I said, oh, he gets the whole thing, you know, what this advanced pretend is all about. And he did such a great job, man. And Michelle, you know, I was disappointed that my favorite song of Michelle's, which was More Than You Know, do you know that song? It wasn't on the soundtrack album. I don't know why, but she sang her ass off in that movie. So great. So just finishing the music saga, you know, okay. So then after Crazy Heart, I was fired up on the music thing, and I called up T-Bone. I said, hey, man, I got some tunes. You want to go in and make an album, you know? And he said, sure, man, come on, you know? So we went into a studio in the Village there, and we made an album with a lot of John Goodwin's songs, some of my songs. Had a great time. And then a few years later, I got a call from Squarespace, website design company, and they wanted me to do a commercial for Super Bowl. And they didn't want to hire Jeff Bridges for Squarespace. They wanted me to come up with a bizarre product with the idea that no product was too weird to not make a website out of it. They gave me a list of things, and one of the things on that list was sleeping tapes. I said, what are sleeping tapes? You know, this tapes, that's such an archaic word. And they said, oh, we don't know. It can be whatever you want. Whatever I want, yeah. Huh. And then also, we're going to make this product, we're going to release it, and all the proceeds can go to Share Our Strength in your No Kid Hungry campaign, which is something I've been very involved with for, 30 years. So that was the clincher. I said, okay, I'm in. How do we do this? He says, however you want to do. You know, it's like this,
right?
So I said, okay, I'm going to go into a studio with Keithus, and we're just going to jam, see what happens. So we go in there for a week. I don't know, it was more than a week. And we just start to come up with ideas. And we have no idea what this album, but I figure sleep, that implies being awake, that implies dreams. So it's very broad subject. And during that time, Kiefer says, why don't you bring all of your, any other old songs that we might work with? So Kiefer and I did this album called Sleeping Tapes. It went to #2 in the ambient music charts, raised $250,000.
Love it.
And it was just so wonderful. Then Kiefer and I would go into the studio from time to time and just jam and do things.
Yeah.
And then during the COVID thing, I thought, God, I've got all of these half-done songs that aren't polished. I'm 76 years old, man. I don't know if I got the poop to go into a studio and polish all these things up. I'm just going to put these things out now. This is what I got, and I'm going to put a visual thing to them. So I, shot stuff on my iPhone and looked at the internet and just built that. And I started to release these, I called it Emergent Behavior, these volumes. And I think I made 5 volumes with about, 3 or 4 songs on each one. I enjoyed the shit out of that,
It's so much fun to make stuff and share it.
Yeah,
it's the best
exactly.
feeling.
And rather than be tight about it. And then also after Crazy Heart, I've always tried to have some kind of little studio wherever house I'm in. So when I moved up to Santa Barbara, 35 years ago or whatever, I wanted to build a studio, and I looked around for a guy who could help me with that. And this guy, Chris Polonis, he's an acoustician, builds studios and stuff. And I broke out my tunes and we played a little bit. And he said, oh, this is good. You got some good tunes here, man. Do you know Michael McDonald? I said, are you kidding me? Sure. He says, well, I'm friends with Michael. I'd like to play him some of your songs. So Michael listens to him, starts to dig these songs. And the next thing I know, we're in the studio making an album. And I've got a band called The Abiders, based on Lebowski.
Yeah.
And we start to tour. The music dream, the Beatle music dream is being realized at, 65 years old or something. Play the Lebowski Fest, have my Beatle moment. You can imagine, you can play into a sea of dudes, man. Come on.
So funny.
It was really wild.
You said something earlier about dreams are safe.
Yeah.
It makes me question, do you tend towards projects that are not dream projects because whatever happens is okay, whereas the dream projects are too dangerous to try because they could fail?
Yeah, but that's got the most juice, man. It's wild. I just bowed out of a movie that I went quite far down in development of it. And I just said, God, I don't have the acting juice to do it, man. I'm having other desires are being built into me that I want to do.
Yeah, you're listening to what's going on in you.
I started to listen to that, and it's so different than my persona or how I'm conceived, not only from the outside, but how I conceive myself. But it was like, it made me think of, Richard Dreyfuss with, what's the movie where he's building the big, Close Encounters, when he's building that thing. I don't know why. It's kind of has me like that.
You're driven towards something.
And I don't know what it is. And so I'm following that, and I'm getting off.
That's
man.
great.
I mean, it's wild.
In acting, when you're playing against another character, does the other character's performance influence what you do?
Of course, yeah, big time.
Is it like a dance?
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. I'll give you an example, just popped into my head. Every once in a while, you'll get a real guy on the set. either a guy who has actually lived the story you're telling or a person who knows what that story is about, you know? So I made this movie called White Squall with Ridley Scott. And it was about this wonderful floating university that this guy had in this ship, a sailing ship, where he would take a bunch of students out and.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, did you see that?
No,
movie?
the idea is amazing.
Yeah.
True story?
True story.
Amazing
True story. And in the middle of this, a white squall happened. And I got to talk to the real guy who I was playing, the skipper of this ship. And he said, it's not like the movies. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, it wasn't a storm. It wasn't like that. I said, well, what was it like? He says, it was calm, and it was like God's hand came down, took the main mast, and just put it underwater. You know what I mean? You know, like a bunch of kids died. His wife died. You know, it was a terrible tragedy. He went around and spent time with each of the families after the incident. But no one connected with each other after that. They didn't want to relive that terrible incident. So they just avoided each other for many, many years, 25, 30 years, I can't remember exactly what. Now we're making the movie, and in the end of our movie, there's a courtroom drama kind of, because it's like, they're going to take my license away kind of thing. But in real life, that didn't happen. It was in international waters. There was no threat of that. But we're shooting this scene, and we had two real guys who were on that ship. One of them was actually at the helm. The ship wasn't moving, but he was, had wheel duty there. And we're doing the courtroom scene, and this fella, he comes up to me when we're shooting the courtroom scene, weeping, and he says, Jeff, I got something terrible to ask you. I say, what? He says, I want to do something. I said, what do you want to do? He says, I want to hug myself. You want to hug yourself? What do you mean? Yeah, he says, I'm playing my father, and my father always blamed me for the ship going down. He says, no wonder the ship went down. You were at the wheel. He says, can I hug myself? I said, well, go ask Ridley, I asked Ridley. He said, sure, yeah. So you're acting the effect of not someone you're playing with, but just in the space, in the vibe, in the room, to have that going on.
The
reality of that. Another one comes to mind, a movie called Fearless, Peter Weir directed. This story was loosely based on, I think it was in Iowa, plane crashing in the cornfield. And Ridley invited a couple who actually went through. The guy was on the plane and his wife was down, and Ridley invited them to talk to us about it. And they came and they talked, and it was as if it happened yesterday. It was so fresh in their mind, but it happened 10 years before. And they were up there for 45 minutes knowing they were going to crash. Can you imagine? And he said, you would think there was panic. He says, not at all. He said, love just was in that fuselage. Everybody was together. We're one here.
That's wild.
He says, I looked across the aisle and there was an old woman there who was frightened. And I think this is what the guy said. He said, I looked over at her. I said, that woman, that could be my mother, And then he said, no, that is my mother. Held her hand.
Wow, beautiful.
They crashed, and you'd think everybody panicking. No panic. It was all just everyone working as one body, what they had to do to get out of there alive. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Love. That love having its way with us. God, we all affect each other. And then with an actor you're working with, wow, of course.
You ever so in a scene that you forget it's a movie?
I'm thinking of a shot. It's a movie about the race cars. I'm playing a guy named Junior Jackson, who's based on Junior Johnson, who's a famous stock car racer. Mm-hmm. We're doing this scene on the racetrack, and we rehearsed it, going, 5 miles an hour and sped up. We were finally going about 90 miles an hour, something like that, just under 100. And the scene was me in the back of the pack. I work my way up through the pack, and I get up to the lead guy, and I actually get, metal to metal with him, and I go ahead like that. And we rehearsed it for a long time, weeks. And towards the end of the rehearsal period, I realized that there's going to be a camera right in my line of sight of life. So I've got to not only do this thing, but I got to act like there's not a camera there, that I'm not going, trying to look around something. So off we go, action, going again, dice through the thing. Now I'm up against the car like this, and I get off the gas just a little bit, and the thing goes crazy, and the 360 after 360, all these cars are coming up behind it, just crazy. All the wives are coming down, a giant crash. The director comes up to me at the end, and he says, "You okay?" "Yeah." "Can we do just one more? We're losing the light. Can you do another one?" I said, "Yeah, okay." You do it again. And now I'm wanting to see what that close-up looked like, because that was a moment when I was totally, like you say, I wasn't acting, I was just into this thing there, beyond there. I didn't know where I was. And, if you were to act that, you would go, I don't know what you would do. Yeah. But here's what I did was just, crash. Just nothing. Everything just my eyes going like this in the background.
Wow. That's wild.
Yeah. That's so
funny. You got to experience a lot of things through making movies.
Oh, God, all the time. Oh, it's so wild. And these books, these photographs, I can relive those times, each one by just thinking.
Have you had to learn any particular things like sword fighting or horseback riding or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. I had cockfighting camp. I learned how to cockfight, how to speak Yugoslavian, how to roller skate, how to ride horses, how to shoot. All of those things. But this is all, it gets back to, I keep thinking of being a kid, and this is great stuff to get to play, And so working with these stunt guys, it's so wonderful.